Hi, everyone. I'm Konni Burton, founder and CEO of The Texan. We just got through talking to Chairman James Dickey. He is the GOP chair, Texas chair, and we had a great discussion. I think you're going to enjoy it. He let us know why he's running for chair again. He also told us or gave us some thoughts about the 86th legislative session. He also gave us a job description of what the party chair does, which I think will be very interesting to many of you. So please take a listen. But after you listen, please go to thetexan.news and read some of our articles. They're fantastic. They're everything from local, state to federal, but very Texas focused. And if you want more of that, we need you to subscribe, because the more people that subscribe to the Texan.news, the more we can grow, the more we can give objective information to voters, and the more fake news we can get rid of in Texas. So please go to the Texan.news and subscribe today. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Konni Burton, CEO and founder of The Texan, and today we are blessed to have Chairman Dickey with us. The Republican party chair of Texas is with us today, and we appreciate very much you being here. But before you say anything, I'm going to give a little introduction for you. So to let everybody know a little bit about Chairman Dickey, I'll read a little bit of this intro, and then he can kind of expound on that for us. James Dickey was elected chairman of the Republican Party of Texas in June 2017, with decades of experience as a conservative activist and Republican leader. Chairman Dickey grew up in Fort Worth, where he graduated valedictorian of his high school class. He earned bachelor's degrees from Stanford University in political science and English. He holds a master's in business administration from Baylor University. Professionally, he is the co-founder and chief operating officer of IMGA. We'll talk a little bit about that because I don't know. I'm curious now as to how that's working with you being. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. A small insurance company that works with insurance agents and provides them with the tools they need to do their jobs easily and quickly. Chairman Dickey was chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. He's been married to his wife, Linda Dickey, for 28 years. 30 years. I was going to say, sometimes these have to be updated. I know mine does. Yes. You know, when you add a year, you have to add another year. Anyway, and they have 3 children, Jay, Donna, and Dakota. In his spare time, James enjoys reading, particularly biographies and histories, and loves spending time with his wife and children. Welcome so much, Chairman Dickey. I appreciate you taking the time to come and visit with the Texan today.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here as one of your first subscribers. And I say that because I was a subscriber within the first 24 hours of you going live.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I am very happy to be here as a guest.
Awesome. So, I touched on that as I was reading your biography, because now the chair of the this is always a hard title for me to say. I have no idea why, but the chairman of the Texas Republican Party is actually a paid position, a full-time position now, correct?
Yeah. At the moment it is.
At the moment. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's as with everything in our party, that's entirely at the discretion of the delegates at the convention. So
that has to be renewed every 2 years, then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So first of all, the chairman has to be elected every 2 years, although this is now the 3rd year in a row that I will be running for this position, because I was first elected in the middle of my predecessor. My predecessor stepped down in the middle of his 2-year term. So I had to run in 2017.
That's right.
And then I had an opponent in 2018. So I had to run in 2018, for which I was elected to a 2-year term. And then I've now had an opponent decide that it would be really cool to have a 10-month campaign for chair, while I'm also doing the job of chair, because Lord knows Texas has no challenges for Republicans. So distractions for the party are apparently not perceived as a problem.
Right. So I totally forgot. So I guess they had so it was in the kind of midterm election for chairman the first time that you ran. Okay. All right. So currently then, so what I was trying to get at with that question is, what about your insurance company? So is that no longer, in other words, is that still part of your bio? Because I didn't even ask you that before you came.
I stepped down from day-to-day operations. What happened was, after the November results, the SREC, the State Republican Executive Committee, the board of the state party, looked at those results and said, you know what, the challenge we face for 2020 is so significant that doing things the way we have done them for quite a while is not necessarily the way we ought to. And so I'd been in the job voluntarily for a year and a half and had already set records. In fact, we now have our audited financial results for the last 10 years are out on our website at texasgop.org/audits. And in those audited financial reports, you can see that during the last 2-year cycle, during which I was chair for over a year and a half, that we raised 25% more than had been raised in any other 2-year cycle on record during those audited 10 years. And we spent double anything we had spent in any prior 2-year of those 10 years on political activity. So we raised more and we devoted even more than we increased the raising by into political activity. And we grew the cash on hand. The cash on hand had grown from previously, it had never been over $1 million. We put it at $1.5 million.
Wow.
And so we made big strides. Well, the board looked at that and said, okay, that's great. But as it sits right now, at the time, in a volunteer position, there was a lot I could do for the party, and I was putting in 50 or 60 hours a week for the party. But there were plenty of times when the party would say, we'd love to have you show up at this event next Tuesday, and I had conflicts, so I couldn't do that.
Right.
And the board said, we want a budget that does much, much more. So actually our budget for this year is a target of triple what our highest prior target had been.
Wow.
And we are setting records. In fact, by the end of this month, it's near the end of July.
Yeah.
By the end of July, we will have raised more for the party by the end of July than most of the last full 10 calendar years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very awesome.
And so the board said we'll pass a budget whereby the chair is a full-time position. So I stepped down from my insurance operation and went full-time on January 1. That's when we did it because that's when the budget covered. And we had a wonderful donor who agreed to cover the cost until next year's convention, which is even better.
I remember that now that you're saying that. Yes.
And then it will be up to the convention to decide whether the position should always be paid, should never be paid, or whether, as in most corporations, that'll be that decision and will be delegated to the SREC, as many of the operating decisions of the party are delegated by the delegates to the SREC.
Interesting. Well, I remember, and everybody has their viewpoint. I respect everybody's whether they wanted it paid or not paid. I just remember when you're the previous chairman who had stepped down. One of the problems was the amount of travel, as I recall, that he talked about. It's time consuming, and just from my perspective, it's one thing of having the money, raising money, yada yada, and I get all that. But just from the time perspective, I always thought, my gosh, it seems like that needs to be a paid position because it's a full-time job, as is legislature. You're right. Not that I'm advocating for paying that because I'm not. But it's not part-time. Even though a lot of us call different positions part-time, they're not, right? So anyway.
Well, and in fact, that's one of the things I would encourage. Having been a county chair in a big county for 3 years before, if there are county chairs who are able and willing to raise the funds to make that a full-time position, their board is willing to make that a full-time position, I think the party in many of our counties would be helped by that. And, that would be a fantastic thing.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. That discussion should be had. Whatever they decide ultimately is their decision.
By each of those boards.
Absolutely. All right. So we've talked a little bit about your background. Obviously, you're running for re-election for Texas State GOP chair. Why?
Well,
why are you running again?
The biggest reason why I'm running again is because we have things working at a better level than they have on record. I very much admired and appreciate the advice and counsel of Steve Munisari. I think he was a fantastic chair. Going back quite a while, there were a couple of really good chairs back in the 80s who dealt with the challenges of being a Republican in Texas in the 80s.
We forget how soon we forget, right?
We do.
Yes.
So So I admire and respect that. But the fact is, you look at our audited results and everything else, we are performing at a level that we have not performed at in really in decades. And part of that was residual problem from fallout of past conflicts and past difficulties in leadership at the party. And so I think we have an amazing mix going. We both advocated very strongly for our principles and for our platform at the legislature and made real gains there. I mean, one of the frustrating things is people who are so interested in scoring other points that they're disparaging the actual victories we got. It is not an insignificant thing that cities are no longer allowed to annex you without your vote. It is not an insignificant thing that your religious liberty is now protected. It is not an insignificant thing that we got dozens of Democrats on record opposing saving the life of a baby that survives abortion. It is not an insignificant thing that we saved $5 billion in property tax cuts, right? Those are not insignificant things. And I would challenge those who seem committed to making the case that all of that is irrelevant and insignificant to think pretty seriously about the point they're trying to make. To have done all of that and raise significant funds and put the party on a better operational front. Well, we've improved. We're conservative. Not a lick of debt, more cash on hand than ever before, more funds raised than ever before, a bigger political operation. If you care about Texas in 2020, if you think it's important that we defend Texas for 2020, we already have agreement, fundraising in place, plans we are working on where we are going to take the RPT from last cycle having 8 paid field staff around the state, and that's more than we had in most prior scenarios, but the most we had ever had was a couple of dozen paid field staff around the state, that as far as the records I can find. And the plan right now, agreed, signed off on, ready to be implemented, already raising money for it, is 150 paid field staff managed by the Republican Party of Texas in 2020.
Wow.
Why would you not want to see that succeed? So why do I want to run for re-election? Because there is no way that I would do all the work and all the preparation, and it's taken years to get to this point. I mean, you'd be amazed at how many times I talk to a donor or talk to an elected official or talk to someone else, and the reason why we've got the credibility and we're making the gains we're making is not just because I was consistent last year and consistent the year before, but because they knew me when I was a county chair 2 years or 3 years ago, or they knew me when I was a precinct chair 6 years ago, or they knew me when I was a national delegate 10, 11 years ago, right? They have known me for years, and they have seen me operate with integrity and consistency on our principles and for our principles for over a decade in Texas politics. And it matters. It's just now paying off. There's no way that I'd want to change that.
Right. Got it. So you kind of led into this. I'm also opening up my phone because, of course, my computer's battery is starting to die. So I've got the questions here as well. So anyway, that kind of leads me. It was a question I had further down, but you touched on the legislature and you mentioned several things that were very successful for Texans that came out of the legislative session. So do you consider the legislative session a success or a failure?
I consider it progress. So first thing, as a conservative, I am grateful to the founders of Texas that they set in place a legislature that on purpose makes it very, very easy to kill bills.
Yes.
Because if they did not do so, just think, I mean, people forget, right? People have short memories.
Yes.
For over 100 years, Democrats had unrestricted control of the Texas legislature. There was one legislature in the late 70s where we had one elected Republican in the entire 181 members of the entire
unbelievable
in the entire legislature, right? During that 100+ years that they had unrestricted control of Texas, just think what a disaster they would have made of Texas if we did not have a structure that makes it easier to kill things than to pass things. So I am grateful to our founders. And as conservatives, we should all be grateful that it is hard to pass things in the Texas legislature. Now, it's frustrating when we want stuff passed. But
depends on which side of the bill you're on, right?
Exactly. That is frustrating, of course. So that's why I say, was it an unrestricted success? No, I would only count it as an unrestricted 100% success if every one of our 5 legislative priorities had gotten passed. So what I find frustrating is people who agree with us on the legislative priorities, who for some reason want to pretend that failure to fully pass all 5 equates to utter failure. And no progress. When, let's take them one at a time. So we have life, right? Did we pass the total and complete abolition of abortion in Texas? No, we did not. So we did not achieve that objective. That objective, obviously, was a significantly high bar that would be difficult to achieve. On the other hand, we not only passed the aforementioned bill that got Democrats on the record for just how extreme they are on this issue, which that alone is worthwhile, but we also got a bill passed requiring the abortion doctor personally to deliver information about alternatives. And one of the things that the abortion movement has found in other states is that a limiting factor frequently is the availability of the abortion provider, the actual doctor. And so this is hopefully we will get a lot more people walking away from the abortion industry, like we have seen over the last 30 years as more and more information's become available. Abby Johnson being just a big, obvious example of that.
Yes.
But also that is a very real gain to anyone who wants to reduce the incidence of abortion in Texas. So that's the first one. Religious liberty. We passed a bill that protects small business owners from being prevented by cities, from having cities take into consideration who they donate to, including their charitable donations, so that they're not risking small businesses' livelihood on an unconstitutional restriction of religious liberty. That is a victory for religious liberty, no question. One of the biggest ones that was a lot of angst and animosity.
Maybe?
Yeah, consternation.
I don't even know what we're talking about, but I wanted to offer that word to you.
Exactly. A lot of challenging discussion around around unlicensed carry. Right?
Oh yes,
so,
yes.
That issue we did not get.
Right.
Unlimited unlicensed carry of handguns in Texas.
Sure.
We did, for the first time ever, get any unlicensed carry of handguns in Texas when we got disaster carry.
Yes.
So we do have unlicensed carry of handguns after a disaster. It's a very logical thing. It's a good thing. It is a small step in the right direction, but it is a step in the right direction. Not only that, God forbid, I hope we have no named disasters for the foreseeable future.
Yes.
But when and if we do, and this kicks in, and the world does not end, and it won't, right? As we all know, it won't.
No.
That will be yet another proof point. That'll be yet another arrow in our quiver, if you will, as we fight to get to completely unlicensed carry. The other thing is, we got a bill passed that prevents municipalities from putting requirements on how you store your own weapons in your own home. That is a significant gain towards self-defense freedom. Right. So again, not reaching the target is not the same as not making progress. And so we have those. And of course, the big one, tax cuts. And there was a lot. Our goal was to completely eliminate the maintenance and operations section of property tax and replace it with a sales tax.
Right.
And if you will remember, there was a period in the middle of the session where there was a discussion, and in fact, some of our elected officials did exactly what we asked towards replacing maintenance and operations property tax with a sales tax. And a whole lot of people on our own side got mad at them for it. So, okay, we didn't achieve that goal, but we weren't united in fighting for that goal. And then taking a step back. So we made gains in an environment, knowing as conservatives where everything is made on purpose to be harder. We made gains on every one of our issues. And then, don't even get me started on the 92 other bills. We've been saying 60 something, but now that we're past the veto period, we've actually done more analysis. There's 92 bills that were passed that advanced something in our platform. And most of those I either testified on in person, or one of our state Republican executive committee members testified. We had a fantastic legislative priorities committee that we established and that I empowered and encouraged, want to ask them to please participate and be involved. And they did. And they made a difference. We were hearing legislators talk about the priorities of the party and the platform of the party, and not in a disparaging way, in a positive way of, this is an element that's in the platform. How can we work together to make it pass? We had not seen that before. This is significant gains. Now, there are some people who have expressed frustration that we didn't get everything all at once. And I would caution them that if, in fact, we had a situation where we could get everything we wanted at once, that's not a conservative scenario. That is not.
Let me, interject on the one where you talked about the sales tax discussion versus, when the property tax were. So, in defense of those that you were talking specifically when wanted some of this and some of the other, right? I think my understanding from a lot of the that might be pushed back with on you on that is that there was they want the abolition of a property tax altogether and it just be a sales tax, right? That was really the pushback. Is that what you were discussing a few minutes ago?
So the arguments I heard were, I'm concerned because we'll still have some property tax and we'll still have some sales tax. That's exactly
right. Correct. That's the argument that I heard as well.
But our legislative priority was only to replace school M&O. I mean, the reality is cities and how do you think a county funds itself?
Right.
With property tax.
Right.
School M&O it's a big part. It's Absolutely. About half of everybody's property tax. Right. But it is not even close to all of everybody's property tax. So everybody who made that case of, no, we should only be fighting for this if it totally wipes out property tax.
Right.
Doesn't understand Texas tax funding. I mean, Texas tax funding requires cities and counties and schools not counting the M&O, all those extra big stadiums and stuff that they do bonds for, right? All of that gets funded not out of school M&O. Those are other property taxes. So our legislative priority never asked for abolition of property tax in exchange for sales tax. It always asked for a swap of some of the property tax for some sales tax.
Interesting.
Actually, it said some consumption tax, but sales tax is
right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Interchangeable. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the delegates decide as the convention approaches, right? Because that might have opened some eyes then, perhaps.
And that's the bottom line, right? The bottom line is I committed to, and I did. I committed to when I ran to fight for what the delegates decide to put in the platform, what the delegates decide to put in our legislative priority. I fought for those things, and I fought for them at a level that we hadn't seen before, and was able to do that without blowing up the party.
Right.
Because we have had scenarios in the past where we had chairs who were visible for advancing a principle, and the party went broke. The problem is it takes both. This is very much a team sport, right?
Sure,
if we're going to get anything as a legislator, you understand, right?
Absolutely.
If you're going to get anything through the legislature, it takes a team working together.
Absolutely. And speaking of the legislature, so obviously the 2018 midterm was devastating for the GOP.
Well, actually, let me take a step back. is absolutely disappointing, and we have a lot of work ahead of us to fix that. But again, people have really short memories. The Republican Party only even won the Texas House in 2003, right? It was as recent as 16 years ago when we didn't have the House at all. And in 2009 session, the Republican Party had a 1-seat majority in the Texas House. 1. 2009, 10 years ago. So, yes, I am disappointed and frustrated that we lost all 12 seats, especially because now the good news is our data had shown that the worst case scenario was not 12, but 16. We could have, theoretically, we were looking at potentially losing 16. Fortunately, the governor, who had 100 field staff around the state, put a lot more of his team's attention on saving legislators' seats than on running up his numbers. And as a Republican, I think we should all be thankful for that. But we had at least 2 members of the House who lost their seats, one of whom lost by less than 2%, and on election night had over $100,000 in the bank. Actually, $130,000. And then we had a second legislator who lost by less than 2%, who had spent a significant portion of the last couple of weeks of the election campaigning for other members in other districts. So, yeah, we lost 12. Some of those were self-inflicted, and that's unfortunate. Now, because we lost those 12, it'll only take 9 more. We still have a 9-seat majority, but it would take 9 more to flip the House. And we have 9 races where our margin was 5 points or less. 7 of those 9 are in the DFW area, as you're aware, right? That affected you. Our 2 Senate seats that we lost, one each in Dallas and Fort Worth. Those were both DFW. Part of the reason why that is such a challenge for us at this moment is because, again, short memories. As recently as 2014, we won the Dallas-Fort Worth area by 275,000 votes. And in this last election, we lost it by 100,000 votes. So as I have been talking to people, donors, legislators, activists, supporters all around the state, as I've been talking to people, as I've been presenting to the Trump campaign, to all the other campaigns for the RNC about the help we need here, one of the consistent points I've made is, going from 275,000 victory in Obama's second midterm in 2014 when Abbott and Cornyn were on the ballot to losing by 100,000 in 2018 in Trump's first midterm and when Senator Cruz was on the ballot. The real question for us, is that a trend or is that a dip? And the answer, as with everything for people who believe in personal responsibility, the answer is it depends on us. And so that's why we are raising the money we must to employ and train and deploy the staff we must. That's why we put our first staffers, our first full-time field staffers, went out in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in January. We have already been registering voters, recruiting and training volunteers, equipping folks at an earlier point and more significantly than ever before.
So those 7, because obviously the 2 Senate seats cannot be flipped. Because it'll be,
they won't be up again.
Yeah. Right, won't be up again. So your plans to flip those, you do have plans to flip those back to Republicans.
Absolutely.
Then, and that's part of it. You just
the biggest part of that is recruiting great candidates for each of those spaces, and then training those candidates. And so we have a candidate recruitment task force that is headed by Kat Parks, the Hamilton County Party chair. Fantastic team that she's put together that is statewide. They put together 35 candidate training schools, campaign training schools around the state. We did it in partnership with Leadership Institute, which does a great job training folks.
Yes, they do.
And we did 35 trainings, and we've had 1,200 paid attendees at those trainings across the state already so far this year.
Interesting. Okay. So another obviously huge part of why it was, and I will say the word devastating because I do think it was for 2018, and I get what you're saying about the previous and all that. But another part that was a problem was the amount of money that Beto raised and spent throughout Texas.
Well,
right?
And it wasn't just Beto. So Beto raised $80.3 million, and over 70% of that came from outside Texas. That was particularly noteworthy because until then, the $38.9 million that Senator Cruz raised in that same race would have been a national Senate record. So, and O'Rourke raised double that, $80.3 million. Yeah, that's significant, but we did the research, and there was over $138 million raised from outside Texas to try and flip our congressional seats and our Senate seats. This is just one example. Congressman Carter from Central Texas, his opponent, who was a previously unknown candidate out of nowhere, raised over $14 million, and again, over 70% of which came outside. We lost 2 congressional seats of our 25, so we still have 23 of our 36 congressional seats. Those 2 we lost, we would have lost them in 2016, except the Democrats had no candidate in those races in 2016.
Interesting.
Once we all saw that President Trump lost those districts in 2016, everybody started getting involved in those races, and each of those 2 races cost a total of $27 million. And so, yes, a lot of money was raised, and a lot of money was deployed to try to flip Texas. And one of the problematic things of the fact that, 6 years ago or 5 years ago now in 2014, Senator Cornyn won by 27%, his race. Last year, Senator Cruz only won by 2.7%, actually less than that. One of the big problems of it coming that close is that it did excite Democrats on wanting to flip Texas. The good news on our side is I was trying in the middle of last year to tell people that they needed to be concerned that Texas could not be taken for granted, that the mindset, like you said, people's memories are short. The mindset at the national level, when I was going to D.C. and saying we need help and we need support and we need people working here, there were a whole lot of people giving me the D.C. version of bless your heart, right? And I
think I like the Texas one better.
Exactly. So the only good news, or the best news out of last November's result, is that no one is any longer saying that. So, for example, Senator Cornyn last week hosted a fundraiser for the Republican Party of Texas in D.C., and the final numbers aren't in yet, but we already have brought in more than 40% more than the last time we did a fundraiser there a year and a half ago. So
obviously you're busy raising money to combat anything. I mean, obviously, anybody, the Democrats, when they spend that kind of money in whichever party it is that spends that kind of money in Texas, the other party's got to combat that. So
exactly. So one of the points I like to make to everybody is money is in politics, money is not sufficient, but it is necessary.
Right.
You have to have enough. You have to have table stakes. You got to be in the game. Thankfully, money does not buy elections, because if it did, we'd have President Clinton right now. If it did, we'd have Senator O'Rourke right now. So those are good examples of how more money doesn't necessarily get deployed better, and you get diminishing returns. But you absolutely have to have enough to do what you must. And the good news is we are doing that, and we're doing that successfully.
Excellent. Let's see. Oh, straight ticket voting is what I wanted to mention. So that's obviously something that's different for voters.
It is different.
We no longer have straight ticket voting. Are you thinking about that? Are you educating about that? What do you want to do to educate the voters about that?
We do want to talk to voters about that a lot. One of the things we have learned is that retention doesn't last very long. So it wouldn't do us much good to talk to voters about that a lot right now, because the election is still almost a year and a half away. So that is a thing we are preparing for conversations. As a small government conservative, as I am, one of the things I appreciate is that it's almost impossible to predict the unintended side effects of any government change.
That's right.
And the removal of straight ticket voting is a government change, right?
Yes.
It's a big, sweeping government change. Now, what we do know from looking at a bunch of other states that there were only 7 left that had straight ticket voting, and a bunch had removed it, and there weren't sweeping impacts of the removal of it over time. So
these other states,
that's reassuring. Yeah,
interesting.
The one thing I am comfortable that we could have avoided had we not had it, right? So had we not had straight ticket voting, we would not have seen the wipeout of over 50 judges in Harris County in one day. I do not believe, especially given the comparison of the credentials and quality of the incumbents versus the challengers, I do not think we'd have seen that. I don't think we'd have seen the wipeout of the county judge in Harris County, who had tons of experience compared to his competitor and very favorable ratings and lost anyway. I do not think we'd have lost 31 out of 32 Court of Appeal seats. Because those losses were a result of the urban straight ticket voting numbers.
Right.
That said, we have got to do a really, really good job on our side educating folks that when it comes to the general election, you're not only deciding, do I like person A better than person B? You are also deciding, do I like who person A is going to vote for better than who person B is going to vote for? So if you are not, I mean, I hope you are. I hope, and certainly everyone listening to this podcast would be, but if you're not really familiar with your own House member, if you're not really familiar with your own member of Congress, if you know nothing else, you will know that a Republican member of Congress is not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House. And so that alone should be a massive tiebreaker.
Right.
And so, and the same goes, of course, for the Texas House, because, while I do not believe, I firmly believe we are going to win some of those 12 seats back, and we are not going to lose those 9 seats that were within 5 points. And we do what we must. They will not flip the Texas House. If they did, though, not only would they have the majority again in the Texas House, not only would they be picking the speaker, but they would be controlling redistricting for the Texas House for the next decade. And that is, and we're going to have 3 more congressional seats up this next time. It is likely we'll go from 36 congressional districts to 39 congressional districts. That is a massive change, which means massive redistricting, big impacts, and we cannot let the Democrats control that. So as we're getting the message out next year about the absence of straight ticket voting, the importance of going all the way down the ballot, it is really important that people realize what is at stake next year.
So we only have a few minutes left. So the state party chair, hopefully, I mean, it's politics is confusing. So I don't want to talk down to anybody because sometimes you just don't think about it, so you don't know. But obviously, a state party chair is not elected on the ballot in 2000. The general ballot. That's not how a state party chair is elected. Right. So just help us quickly, those listeners and those who are watching, know how the GOP state party chair is elected, and how maybe if they want to be at the convention where it is, how they can be a delegate to the convention. Help us to understand.
Actually, I'd like to take a step back first and talk about what the responsibilities of the state party chair are.
Perfect. That might have been nice.
So the duties of the state party chair. First of all, the biggest legal liability, legal responsibility the state party chair is to conduct the state primary. So I am the election official responsible for accepting every filing for every candidate in the state of Texas whose territory covers more than a single county. So if they cross any territory that crosses any county boundary, they have to file for the primary if it's a partisan race, and so it's got a R next to it on the ballot. If it's partisan race, they have to file with my office. And so the first responsibility is making sure that all of the county chairs across the state that they've got the support they need to run their primary. And as a former county chair, I know how significant an effort that is. So we're doing preparation right now. We've got new manuals and new support materials. We're preparing for a big training session for the county chairs coming up in September. And then my team is ready to accept all those filings. As just one of many examples, we were required to come up with the form that the president's campaign is using to put him on the ballot via the use of petitions. So we had to promulgate what the petition form looked like and what was in it and what the requirements were. Not only that, it's our responsibility when those are filed to review them and make sure that they are satisfactory. And this is so important because literally, if we don't do an excellent job managing the filing of those petitions, the Democrats using a lawsuit could threaten to get President Trump off the ballot. Right? That's how big the stakes are. And that is our biggest legal responsibility, is to manage that. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a big, significant operation, and it is full of deadlines and requirements and legal responsibility and that. And, had I not been a county chair for 2 cycles and deeply involved in managing that process, it is not something I would have been comfortable with. The second big responsibility is you have to raise money.
Yeah.
And you have to be really good at making the ask. And so to that end, I would encourage everyone to go to texasgop.org and donate today. We could really use your support. And if you make that a recurring monthly or annual donation, we would appreciate that very much.
That's awesome.
But absolutely seriously, I met with a couple of donors yesterday, and one of those that I met with said, you're good at making the ask. And it's absolutely right. It is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's relatively easy for me to do because I believe so firmly in what we're doing.
Sure.
And so I have no problem going to anyone who is like-minded, who shares our principles, who wants to see Texas remain great, keep Texas great. I have no problem going to them and asking them to join our chairman's circle at $25,000 or more per year. And that is absolutely wonderful. I also love every donor is a member of the Grassroots Club at $8.25 a month.
Right.
That is fantastic. And the facts are, and our budget is public, it's out at all of our SREC meetings. The facts are we are setting records in every kind of fundraising. So that's one of the wonderful things. We brought in all sorts of new donors. We brought back donors who hadn't given to the party in years.
Interesting.
And that is so important. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of travel, a lot of visits. But my entire team, they know if I'm going somewhere, it is so important that when I'm going there, I need, if at all humanly possible, I need to meet with the county chair and make sure they have what they need to be successful at their job, with our SREC members, that things are going well for them in their district, for our elected officials, that they have the support from the party that they need, for the candidates, that they know how to access all of our equipment, all of our stuff. And because I'm legally responsible for, and donors and
Sure.
donors, for me to be able to meet with them, thank them for their support, bring them on if they haven't been on in a while. And it is a fantastic mission. But because I'm legally responsible for the primary, I am required, and the entire party is required, to be neutral in every intra-party contest. And so that is one of the things we have to do is make sure that we make, the way we do neutrality, we make all of our tools equally accessible to any candidate. So any candidate who reaches out to us are equally accessible for our Advantage block walking app, for our GOP data center data, for our Red Dialer app, for the new push texting systems that we have. All of that.
So in other words, you're not going to put the thumb on a particular candidate in the primary. It's
absolutely not.
Fight it out. The best man wins.
Nor would I put the thumb on what the convention goers are going to do or not do on our platform or our rules for next year. Right. And so, because that's where I came from. I came up through precinct convention, then Senate district convention, then state convention, which brings me back to your question.
So quickly, we'll wrap it up quickly. So to become a delegate and get to the state convention, which is, by the way, when is the state convention and
it's
where?
May 16th, 14th through the 16th in Houston, Texas at the George R. Brown Convention Center.
Right. And so to become a delegate, if there's a quick way to kind of go through that
Step
process.
one, vote in the primary, vote in the Republican primary, then attend your precinct convention, which is a little meeting after the vote, sometimes Saturday after, sometimes the evening after the Tuesday. You check with your county to find out when. Then at that precinct convention, you ideally you are elected a delegate to your Senate district convention. Your Senate district convention, ideally, you are then elected a delegate to the state convention. And then at the state convention, because it's a national year, we will be not only voting on state leadership, we will also be voting on national leadership and national delegates.
That's right.
And so we will be electing the delegates to the next national convention as well. And the national committee woman and the national committee man and the state party chair, the state vice chair, and the state committee man and committee woman from each of the 31 Senate districts.
So if any of you have been wondering for a long time now, how do I do this? How does this all work? That's exactly how it works. And again, we know you're a very busy man. You've got another appointment I know coming up that you've got to get to. I appreciate so much your time coming and visiting with us. And I know this answers a lot of questions for people who, want to know you, what you're about, why you want to run again, what you have done and what you plan on doing. So I appreciate it very, very much.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. I mean, you and I have known each other. We've been in the trenches for years.
We have.
And very grateful for you and grateful that the Texan exists.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We're doing well, and we appreciate all our listeners and readers. And if you want any more information, please go to thetexan.news and read some free articles, and then please subscribe, because the more you subscribe, the bigger we can get, the more stories we can report on, and the more fake news we can get rid of. Thanks, everybody. See you later. If you've been enjoying our podcast, it would be awesome if you would review us on iTunes. And if there's a guest you'd love to hear on our show, give us a shout out on Twitter. Tweet @TheTexanNews. We're so proud to have you standing with us as we seek to provide real journalism in an age of misinformation. We're paid for exclusively by readers like you, so it's important we all do our part to support The Texan by subscribing and telling your friends about us. God bless you, and God bless Texas.